Living for weekends, wishing I could take a break from this world. Running on a hamster wheel, but searching for something I can't feel. I just wanna be a lost girl and fly like a bird, feel my wings spread, levitate above the ground and make eye contact with clouds. Now I'm rising, I'm soaring above it all. I just wanna be free, finally, I wanna be free, finally, I wanna be free, finally, I wanna be free, finally. I always stay dreaming, never imagined I lose my spark. Living in this crazy time, putting back the pieces of my mind. I know how to run from the dark and fly. Till my wings spread, levitate into the clouds. I'm so high above the ground. I'm rising, I'm soaring above it all. I just wanna be free, finally, I wanna be free.
Race, conversations, and law enforcement. This is Moses' People Speak. Welcome to another episode of Moses People Speak. I am your host, Terry Watson, and I'm very excited to be here today. We have another powerful discussion for you, and I'm hoping that we can engage, so ask questions, so on and so on. Before we get started, I do want to dive into something that we are celebrating this week, which is the 110th commemoration of battle. We actually had a great program on Saturday with a lot of great history, which is great because it also leads in today's discussion. Today, when we are talking to our guest today, I want you to keep in mind one thing. So this past Saturday, like I said, marks the 110th anniversary of this historical event, which was a swearing-in of Samuel Battle, who became the first Black police officer in the NYPD. During that time where Black officers were not accepted, and there were tactics used to keep Black officers from applying to the police department. In addition to not being included, those tactics were put in place to disqualify Black officers from being able to pursue opportunities for promotion. One story that stood out to me in relating to today's conversation was the story of Philip Hadley, who was appointed to the NYPD in August of 1892, but was dismissed in November of that same year for a violation which at that time warranted a 2-day suspension. So fast forward to today in 2021. We are here speaking with Sergeant Cornelius Rodgers of the new London Police Department. As we look at the history of Black in law enforcement and the importance of promotion, Sergeant Cornelius Rodgers joins us to discuss his experience of getting dirtied up. Getting dirty up is a practice of bringing in this disciplinary actions around the time of a promotion in order to justify getting passed over. So before we get started, before we bring Sergeant Cornelius Rodgers on, let's take a quick look of the interview that he did with US Today.
I always know this. I'm black. I'm always going to be black. I wake up. I've been black for 42 years. And I understand that there is discrimination and racism in America. I can't deny that. No one wants to see someone die. It's hard for the public to see someone die at the hands of law enforcement because everyone looks at law enforcement as helping. And being a black man, I look at it as why does this happen and what can I do to change that culture in my own police department, in my own community. That's why I chose to be a police officer in the town that I grew up in, because I felt that was the best way of giving back.
That's fantastic. Well, welcome, Sergeant Cornelius Rodgers. Welcome to Moses People Speak. How are you today?
Pretty good. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. So as you saw the intro, I talked about this concept of being dirtied up as a historical perspective, right? Starting back in 1892. I'm pretty sure before then, but that's the content of which I speak within. And I really I read your story, and something that stuck out to me was definitely what you're going through now in relation to what happened to Philip Haley. But before we get into that conversation, please tell us about yourself, how long you've been in law enforcement, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, my name is Cornelius Rodgers, 42 years old. I've had a lifetime desire to be a police officer. Ever since a little kid, I could say it was probably imprinted in me. I lived in low-income housing, and the police department was right next to the projects where I lived at. And the first vision I could see or remember of a black man going to work was a black man named Mr. Barry. And we used to call him Old Man Barry. And Old Man Barry lived around the corner, and he used to have a little lunchbox. And he was a black man, and he would walk to the police department every day. And I remember seeing that. I guess that probably imprinted in me. As I got older, I used to sneak out away from everybody so they wouldn't know. And I joined the police explorer program that was run by a black woman. And that instilled me throughout my high school years of being in law enforcement. Once joining in 2003, I held various positions in narcotics. I received numerous awards. But during those 17, 18 years, there was always, they always reminded me that I wasn't them. And that always came in the form of discipline.
Wow. So with that said, you dive right into it. So can you just describe in your eyes the perspective of the black police officer today?
Being a black police officer, one, I'm going to be black. Like I said in my USA Today interview, first thing, I'm going to be black. I'm always going to be black. The black community sometimes tries to test your blackness because they'll say you're not black enough because I didn't let them go for selling drugs, or I didn't let them go because of X, Y, and Z. So being a black police officer and then being a black police officer in the town you grew up in and still live in, it's a very challenging aspect. Just like you spoke about female police officers, it's a whole nother. I have to pass the black test. I got to pass the blue test. I got so many tests I need to pass to be accepted. But I wouldn't want to do this for nothing else. I wouldn't want to do anything else. And I feel being a black police officer, I can relate to black people because I can understand their stories. I've been pulled over by being black in the white suburban towns in my neighborhood around me. So I can understand some of these stories. I can relate to those stories. So when someone says, "Hey, I don't really like cops, but I can deal with you," that makes me feel good, and hopefully I try to make that a good experience. And because it's a blackface, sometimes people are more likely to speak to me because I'm not judging them, as they will say.
Right.
You're not judging me. You're me. And I go, and I understand some of their struggles.
Right. And so, and again, thinking about your experience, you are now a sergeant, right? So
Yes.
you have a leadership position. What were some of the I guess what were some of the trials and tribulations that you went through in becoming a sergeant? Like, how was that process for you?
Well, the process of being a sergeant, I got promoted when the administrator of the test didn't give out a book. He just told you show up that day and take the test. Um, and that I always found strange. A lot of people didn't pass it. It was a very hard test. On the written portion of that test, I scored number one, which a lot of people were shocked. But then it came to the oral board portion of that exam, which I failed. I dropped down to being one to, I believe, being number three, which was very disappointing to me because I believe I'm very articulate. But that test itself, it showed some kind of bias in certain things because it's based off of the opinion of the people of the oral board, and there's no right or wrong answer. So I understood those aspects. Also, in addition, in the state of Connecticut, they have a rule of three rule in the state of Connecticut, which means a group of three, myself, you, Terry, and Big Brother Sean, okay? The chief decides, hey, I don't like you, Terry. And he doesn't have to really give a reason. He decides, I'm going to pick Sean. And then Sean gets promoted, and then you and me look at each other, and we don't know why we got skipped, but because it's management rights, they can do so. Just recently, I say in the past 7 years, they've added in there, if a minority has scored number one on an exam, you shall promote. They were starting to see that this rule of three is being used in a discriminatory practice. So they said, hey, if a minority scores number one, you shall promote them. But if I score number two, all right, you can skip it.
Wow. Let's dive into that because I know that one of the things that you and there's an article about your following the lawsuit, and we can post that in the chat box. The lawsuit that you're is it still active for one
Yes.
thing?
Yes.
It is active. Okay, so I know there might be some things you can't go into, but can you sort of describe what led to that lawsuit and where is that?
Honestly, what led to that lawsuit was my mother passed away in 2016, and I remember this vividly. My mother worked just so I could have. In return, I always made sure that I never disappointed my mother. So anytime there was any discipline, I ate crow. I took it just to make sure my mom would be able to look at me in a favorable light. Because of that, I wasn't willing to fight, knowing that I was being treated differently, because I wanted to make sure I could pay the bills. I got a house here. I can't afford to lose my house. And I took that very to heart. All the men in my family are mostly drug dealers or dead. I'm the only one. So if anyone comes looking for my family, mostly females, if they need something, they come to me. With that, I couldn't take it. My mother, before she passed away, she said, "You're in a good spot." She goes, "You've made it." I told her the day I was getting promoted. She passed away in February. I told her, "Mom, I'm getting promoted in March. Can't wait for you to be there." And she looked at me and said, "Baby, I'm not going to be there." With that, I knew that I had more in me She told me before she passed away, you have great things. You're blessed. You have greater things for you. Don't stop. My mother decided to stay in the job she was in because she had to make sure we were okay. I have no kids. I have nothing. So why not go for it? Why not go for it all? And that's what I decided to do. And why should I be just complacent with where I'm at? And I decided that wasn't what the kind of life I wanted. And I believe that once the other people realized that, I became a threat. And becoming a threat as a black man is totally different than becoming a threat as a white guy. Because you could say what you want to say as a white man, and you're just passionate. If I say something, you're the angry black man. And I started to realize that, and you can be outspoken and get your point across, which I choose to do. I do that often. Or you can just be very brash, which that's what I try to do. Because anytime you stand up for yourself, you will be classified as that angry black man, and as which I've been told in the past, I don't know my place.
Wow. It's funny. I not so long ago, back in April, we had a conversation with Edwin Raymond from the NYPD. He was part of the NYPD 12, and it's something he says something very similar actually about about knowing your place, knowing and he actually had his he actually recorded his supervisor saying that, which was that was very unique. Reminding him that one of the reasons why he's not getting promoted or being passed up on was because he didn't know his place. And so let's talk about that, because this is so deep, Cornelius. As we're celebrating this week the 110 battle, and people ask why are we celebrating something like this, and I always say because you need to understand what Black law enforcement had to do to get where they're at today. And again, this is a conversation, and I say it again, we talk about Black law enforcement, but in general, this is law enforcement, because you're impacting law enforcement. One thing that you mentioned too, and we have this conversation a lot with Black law enforcement, is the community. How do they understand what happens behind the scenes? Because I think you mentioned before, one of the things that you were that you didn't like was this quote of being a sellout in the Black community. Explain that to me, because I talk about that too with Moses P. Cobb. He was called the same thing. Explain what you mean by that.
So I grew up in low-income housing. Back in the day, they used to call it the Hill. It was the name of an area where everyone sold drugs.
Gotcha.
To this day, the local drug dealers, they know me. Hey, Cornelius, I grew up playing basketball, football with these people. And when I decided to be a police officer, I didn't tell anyone. I wasn't trying to publicize it, but that was always my dream. Right. And it was a shock to people when they saw me at their house. And they're like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, I'm a police officer. It ain't Halloween. I'm actually a police officer.
You mean you didn't steal that uniform and start to patrol the girl?
No, I didn't grab it off of somebody. I'm an actual police officer. And a lot of them looked at me like, how could he do this? This is the same dude we went out with and hung out with. The same guy played basketball. Now he's up here working with the white guys. He forgot where he came from. And I'm looking at him, I'm like, you still selling drugs when I was playing basketball. You're still doing the same thing. You still messing around with the same girl and beating her.
Wow.
I can't. If that's selling out, I guess I'm selling out, because that's not what I'm for.
Right.
And a lot of people say, "Oh, you're not for the community," and I say, "No, I am for the community, because I could have packed up, took my money that the city has given me." Yep. And moved to a nice white suburban town where no one knew me, I'm just the Black guy that lives down across the street, but I decided to stay in New London. And I decided to buy a house in New London. And I decided to give back to my community. So it's hard because I have to, like said before, I got to pass multiple tests. And it was in the beginning of my law enforcement career, it was very tough in the community to accept me because they didn't understand why I was doing this. They thought it was me against them. And I was very strong. I was a good narcotics officer back in the day because I knew the neighborhood. I knew the town, and they looked at, you're telling all our secrets. No, you just doing the same thing you did 10 years ago. It's not a secret. Everybody knew what you were doing. But they took it personal.
Yeah.
That it was a person that they grew up with. But I believe as time progressed that my community started to accept and realize what I was standing for. To this day, I can go out. I've had people that I've arrested come knock on my door. Hey, can I talk to you? Yeah, what's up, man? Hey, I just want to say I messed up. I appreciate you not putting the handcuffs in front of my kids. I appreciate you. You know what? Don't come knock on my door again. You might want to call me or leave me an email. But I appreciate it. And that happens often. I go to the grocery store. People come up to me. Hey, I just want to let you know, I appreciate how you treated me. I appreciate how you treated my son. My son told me that while he was in the back of the cruiser, you rolled down the window for him because you didn't want him to get hot. So
wow.
Those are the moments I take and I hold dear. But in the beginning, it was rough. It was tough. And when you got civilian complaints that came in with your first and last name, you knew it was personal. To this day, I'm not Sergeant Rodgers. Everyone calls me Cornelius. I'm called first name. Where's Cornelius at? Let me see Cornelius. I need to talk to Cornelius. Is Cornelius working? So there is some kind of personal connection I have with the community, but it was rough. It was a bad marriage at first.
Wow. Yeah, and I think that's a hill that especially Black law enforcement find themselves climbing quite often. Even when I started working with law enforcement, I remember at a conference I had, folks were saying, "Why are you spending your energy on law enforcement?" Because they were seen as the other.
Yes.
So that's as a civilian working with law enforcement. I couldn't even imagine what it would be like as being a Black police officer. Cornelius, I want to dive into the your complaint because one thing that I always ask folks is about what support did they get from the union, because you were I guess the answers but you were filing this lawsuit because you were a matter of fact, if you could say, what can you tell us about the lawsuit? What's the behind
the crux of the lawsuit is through my career I've been treated different and I've received harsher discipline than my white counterparts. There's in that lawsuit that's public, there's where I can mention numerous incidences where I and a white police officer were involved in an incident. The white officer is cleared, but yet I'm disciplined, and then I received harsher discipline than what had happened previously. And like I said, once my mother passed away, I realized that no, I can't do this anymore. I'm not going to eat crow just to be, because they try to preach to you, just be happy you got a job. You could be selling crack with your friends over there. Just be happy you here. So they kept on preaching this, be happy you're here. You're a Black man, no college education. You make good money. Don't rock the boat. Just go into work, do what you got to do. Keep your head down. And those are other Black officers who said this to me. You're not going to change anything. Keep your head down and get your money. Don't try to make a difference because that's not going to happen. Unfortunately, I didn't listen to these people. So I received the punishment that I received. Yeah. And it just got to the point where it got comical towards recently, where you just look at just blatant differences where you go, there was a officer who got arrested she was able to book off sick to get arrested, then come back to work, and then she only received 7 days of suspension. And I look at it and I go, well, if you're accusing me of wrongdoing, I should just get the same punishment as her, if that's what you're saying.
Right.
But then the police administration will say, well, you're a sergeant, so you're held to a higher standard. Okay. But then you have a sergeant who was caught stealing money on a road job, and he was written up for conduct unbecoming of an officer, and also falsifying official records. And then the chief gives him a verbal warning. So you can't have it both ways. Which in our state, that's a felony. That's a felony.
Wow.
So there was no arrest warrant for him. It was, don't do it again. And the guy's a smart guy, so he can do math. I mean, he's very smart. I can understand but this wasn't like it happened once. It happened twice. So there was a pattern. Unfortunately, the chief at that time decided that, you know what, we'll give you a verbal warning. And then after 2 years of that, after that incident, the union decided that they were going to go to the chief, and the chief signed an agreement with the union that could not be used against him in progressive discipline. So after 2 years is over with, the union was able to say, hey, if something happens now, well, that you can't use that against him. That wasn't done for me. And it was just constant reminders of, hey, I might wear the uniform, but that's it. I'm all you black, okay? And you're going to be treated black. You're going to be second class. And like I've been told, you know, like you don't know your place. When I was written up recently, they told me you didn't leave the office quick enough.
Wow.
I go, what? Yeah, when he told you were dismissed, you should have left right away. And I go, we share the same office. No, you should have left quicker.
Wow. You know, there's so many Cornelius, I've mentioned to you before we got on air. There's so many parallels between the conversations that I'm having. One of the stories he's mentioned about a fellow police officer stealing money. That was also mentioned by my previous guest, Raymond Hicks, who said the same exact thing. You know, it's this concept of, when you hear these stories over and over again, you wonder, why isn't there a more push for a change to address this? You know, and that's the reason why I was asked that question about the union, because, you know, with the union, they have enough authority where they could potentially address this issue.
Well, you have to remember, unions are here to protect their union members. Okay, so that's their job. It's not their job to say, hey, this guy's wrong, have mercy on him. Their job is to protect the union member and to protect his rights and make sure that the city has done what they had to do, their due diligence, and do correctly. My union had decided that they were going to protect the people I was complaining about, and then publicly go on the radio and compare me to Derek Chauvin, or say, hey, you know, and after a while it got comical, because the union president, you could tell after a while that his disdain for me was personal, and it was. I tell people, you can not like me. I understand that. You know, I might not be the most I'm not expecting everybody to like me, okay? But you can respect me. But as a union member, your job is to protect my rights and also make sure I'm getting the best attorneys or just protection and overall. But you can't come out publicly, compare me to Derek Chauvin. You can't say that, hey, maybe he's the problem and no one else.
Right.
You can't say, hey, I can't believe the NAACP helped him because the black person that he was involved in didn't help him. It's just a lot of stuff, and you sit back and you go, why are you doing this to me?
Right.
Because there's other white officers that he don't get along with, but you
Right.
didn't go out publicly and defame him or defame those officers. You came out and said me. So, I kind of look at the union and I look at the aspect of I'm complaining of discrimination. You choose not to represent me in that aspect. You tell me, hey, we don't want to handle that. And then I realize it's because one of the people that's a stewardess for the union has been arrested for civil rights violations when he was a cop. So it's counterproductive. If I'm screaming racism, the guy who's supposed to help me has just who got arrested federally for it's almost comical to the point where you want to cry because you go, you wouldn't think this would actually happen. So the guy who was supposed to help me in my labor board hearing literally has spent time in federal jail for a civil rights violation. But yet you're telling me not to complain about discrimination.
Yeah, I got to say this too. When you look at the and I love the person that was popped up on the screen just now about the need for more people of color in police departments. The one thing that I point out to, and you already mentioned this, Cornelius, is that sometimes some of those folks in black police officers don't feel the support in the department. What's the answer?
The answer. There was an officer, God bless his soul. His last name was Carter, and he passed away. And honestly, great guy. He passed away. He was young. He came onto the police department. His last name was Carter. He came on the police department, and he was from a neighboring town. And he had the same story as I had. He came from low income. He raised himself up. He was able to go to college, and he decided he wanted to be a police officer. And when he came on, I looked at it as I have an ally. I have somebody who has the same story as me, who's going to be able to go there and be able to just change the culture of the PD. And unfortunately, he passed away of cancer. And I think about this man constantly because I always remember he could have been my Batman or Robin to Batman, because I truly believe he would have made a difference in that police department. And it's just a culture that, especially in New England, we don't have a lot of black police officers. So there's not when I mentioned like Nabulo to other black police officers, they didn't know what I was talking about. We don't have that resource where we can go back and say, hey, I need help with this, or even the networking, where I could say, hey, I know this guy, I can get him on because I know he's a good guy. Because we're not in those positions to bring someone on, because they make sure that we don't get to those positions to be able to bring someone on. If you look at other big police departments, like Boston, New York, you always say there's a lot of Italians, there's a lot of Irish people. It's because they as a culture, they grabbed on and said, hey, let me bring you in. Law enforcement is a great segue into the middle class. And unfortunately, sometimes you're not going to get that invite.
Right. Yeah, I was just listening to a webinar this past week. They were talking about women in blue, and I think one of the panelists mentioned the same exact thing, was don't let them keep you out of this opportunity, right? Because law enforcement, it is a good career, but I think hearing some of the stories that like you have, some of my previous guests have, sometimes it gives people a second, do I really want to go through that? Now, the topic of today was talk about getting dirty up, and I know that's a term that most people is not familiar with. Can you I try to explain at the beginning, but sometimes I might not be the best person to do that. Can you sort of explain what getting dirty up means? What does that mean?
So usually what happens is that the police administration knows ahead of time when promotions are going to happen and when those tests are going to be given. Okay, that's literally, they just don't wake up and say, hey, I'm gonna hold the test. They know it's planned. Okay, so what happens is that they pick who they want or who they want to be on the team. Okay, and they hold the test. Now, if you're not on the team, and usually that team is team white, you as a black police officer, you're going to have to make sure that your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed, because before or after promotional exams, they will make sure that they discipline you to have a reason to skip you. Now, in my city, this is happening across the board. This is happening in public works. This is happening at the police department. This is happening in the fire department, where we have black men who are looking at, hey, why am I being disciplined now when there's a promotional exam or there's an open position? Why are you coming at me, as they always say, why are you coming at me now when this happened a year and a half ago? And usually it's, oh, we didn't know until now. Or we didn't get done with the investigation until now. And you're like, so you might fight it, but you're still going to get skipped. So, and then if you go to the labor board and they say, yeah, you shouldn't have been disciplined. Okay. The city's going to say, I had the rule of 3 and I wasn't going to pick you. So there you go. They move on.
Wow. You know what? It's sort of, it's you know, I talk about the importance of promotion all the time, you know, and you know, the term getting dirty up, that was definitely one that was new to me. I knew of the tactic, right? I knew of that, but I never had a name to call it before.
Well, in which the thing is, this is that the prime example, like I mentioned, the officer that was accused of stealing. Okay, he literally received a written warning. I was accused of workplace violence, which was a joke because I was protecting the rights of a black man whose house got illegally searched. Okay, and the officer pushed me, and I pushed him back, and that's what I got in trouble for originally. Okay. There was no complaint. The officer, we still illegally searched this man's house after we deemed him a psych issue, and nothing happened. So when the promotional exam came up, okay, I have to do something to you, Sergeant Rodgers. Huh? I have to do something. And I'm like, well, what do you have to do? Well, I got workplace violence. How's that workplace violence? Well, so I knew something was up because I can read, and he had the report in front of me, and I'm reading upside down, and I'm seeing that the person who did the investigation said no further action from the chief. So I'm looking at it and I'm like, why am I here? So I even said to him, I'm sitting there, I was like, can I get the report? And he goes, I don't know if I can give it to you. I'm like, well, so I just sit there and I'm listening to him, and he's like, I had a complaint, and we have a very small PD, so we pretty much know everybody. And he's like, yeah, this guy made a complaint. And I'm looking at him like, I just literally talked to this guy no more than a day ago, and the guy that I pushed wasn't the guy that he said made a complaint. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, something's not right. And now that there's a tape that has surfaced, I'm starting to understand why I was being treated the way I was being treated. Recently, a tape has surfaced where the chief was recorded saying some disparaging things about the city. And then what was the crux for me, and which really bothered me, but it was kind of like, all right, this is what I'm talking about. I knew I wasn't just thinking this. It wasn't like I was just imagining this discrimination. This is real. It's when the chief, this officer came to him, and I honestly, I pray for him every night because I know he's going through some tough times in the PD because people don't want to talk to him now. This is what happens when you step out and you go across that thin blue line and you do what's right. People don't want to talk to him. But he did the right thing. And what bothered me the most, and this is what literally justified what was happening to me, was when this officer said, "I can't understand why I'm being passed over in an exam." Now he's a white officer, and he goes like, "I
Yeah.
can't understand this. It's really bothering me. Because of this has caused me a lot of pain with my family, and I'm very upset about this." And the chief decided that the way he was going to sympathize with this officer was say, I understand how it feels to be skipped, because I've been skipped for minorities all the time."
So, for people who is watching, let's put this in a let's visualize this. So you got a white police officer talking to a white police chief, and the white police officer says to the white chief he is upset because he's constantly being passed over, and the response from the chief is, "I know how you feel because, well, let's just call it the affirmative action clause." Is that? I think I get what you say now. When you laugh, it's so comical at a point it becomes comical.
It comes to the point it's you cry or you can laugh. I'm done crying. I've cried enough. I'm dehydrated from the crying. So now all I can do is laugh, because you sit there and you go, if you were truly thinking it as a chief, you wouldn't come out and say it.
No.
So in New England, I always say that we have backdoor racists. So down south, they might call you the N-word. They might call it in your face. They might say it out loud. But in New England, it's more of a backdoor thing. It's, we'll take your opportunities away from you. We'll do things. I'll have someone else do it so it don't come back on me. Those kind of things. So with the small town and the small PD, we don't have really a 7 degrees of separation. It's really like 4. So you can pretty pick out who's doing what to you. And that statement pretty much explained to me that didn't matter what I did, I wasn't going to get promoted. I wasn't going to get promoted. And because he has a bias of minorities in a promotional exam.
Yeah, it's literally the same. You know, when you as you tell me this story, you know, I'm definitely shock is the wrong word, right? Because you know that would say that I'm surprised. But what's I guess shocking, because when we hear the term institutional racism, a lot of people say that doesn't exist,
No.
right? You have no evidence of this. But now we are looking at someone in the top leadership position pretty much saying, not pretty much, they are saying, because it's on tape, that there is minorities are getting promotions over white cops as some type of affirmative action, not because they're qualified.
Yeah, he related his pain of being just passed over for being passed over for minorities. So the question is all right, or he wasn't upset that he got passed over, because he would just say, I got passed over, I understand. What his issue was, I got passed over for minorities. So in his mind is, they were lesser than me. I got passed over, and I understand the pain you're coming from. This officer didn't get passed over for a minority. And then now we're learning that he has said this to another white officer who came to him about being passed over. So I know that he has passed over 3 white officers. 2 of the 3 have come to me and said, yeah, he said this to me. So this is something that is rooted into him. So the 2 promotional exams that I was involved in, and one that just recently they took my points away because he decided he was going to suspend me for 20 days. And then somehow the union decided that was a way of taking my points away. I was never going to win. Now, this officer who came forward, I applaud him because he did what was right. And he sat there and he thought about it, because he was wondering, what would the blowback be? What would happen if I give this tape to the city and nothing happens? Is my career over? And we had these long discussions, and he said to me, he goes, I can't sleep at night not doing the right thing.
Mm.
He
Kudos
did
to
the right
him.
thing. The city, he emailed the tapes to the city. The mayor did what he had to do. And now, unfortunately, the mayor has decided that those tapes never existed. So publicly, he's told people that never happened. And it's upsetting because when I got suspended, you came for my neck. You made sure every paper got it. You made, and I tell people all the time, ask for the video.
Mm.
Ask for the video, because I'm willing to let the video show what I did. Unfortunately, they never want to show the video.
Wow.
I know that the chief decided abruptly to retire on a Wednesday. Nobody retires on a Wednesday. No one wakes up and say, no, I'm going to retire on a Wednesday. They always say, I'm going to wait till Friday. I'll retire. I'll leave. No one retires after 9 years. Everybody's 5, 10, 15. No one says 9. That's a good year for me to retire.
9 years on a Wednesday.
9 years on a Wednesday. No, sorry. No. Mama didn't raise no
That's no, Cornelius. That really is mind-boggling. I'm trying to I'm thinking about all of the things that we talk about on the show. From retaliation to having trumped up charges, from being left out in a promotional conversation, but having someone on tape. Now let's talk about this too, because you said the white officer did the right thing. The one that he did the right thing, but he even understood that there could be a possible blowback for him doing the right thing. It's like the person who does the right thing, they themselves are not free from retaliation.
No. And I feel bad because there's guys who blatantly say, I don't trust him. I don't trust him. I don't want he might take me. And I look at him and I want to say to him, because I know they're probably going to listen. We as police officers, we wear a body camera. I have a camera inside my cruiser. The police department that we work in is taped 24 hours a day. There's nothing we do that ain't taped. Okay. So if you're worried about someone recording you, I have to ask you this question. What are you saying behind closed doors?
Right.
What are you worried about? Because what I say behind closed doors, if someone said, hey, we got you on tape, I'm like, yeah, I said it.
Right.
I said it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So if you're worried about someone taping you, what are you saying?
Wow.
And I feel bad for this man. He might not be from New London, but he loves the city. And just to know that other officers are turning their back on him, and all I could do is say, I'm sorry. You did the right thing. I can't give you an award. I there's nothing I could do but say thank you. But now I have a mayor who doesn't want to admit of the recording.
Wow.
And he wants to give this chief a nice soft landing, which is disturbing because you could have literally said, hey, I found this evidence, I acted quickly, and this is not going to happen in our police department, and we're going to go forward and move on. Instead, it somehow got leaked from the city council that there was possible tape, and now the public is asking for it. And I agree. You know what? This is a dirty, dirty time in our history of that police department. He is now appointed a great man. His name is Brian Wright, and he's great because he's morally and ethically, he has a good compass. He's not great because he's black, because a lot of people go, oh, he's black, so that's why you like him. No, he's a good person. And he would be the first black chief in this department, which we have a very diverse community. Brian Wright's a great guy. He's a good person, and I think that's what we need. I believe he has great credibility, and he's very transparent. And when anything ever happened in our city, he was the person that would come and talk to these groups. So I believe the mayor did the right thing by appointing him. But then I look at Prince County, Georgia, and not Prince County, Georgia, but Prince County, Maryland.
Oh, yeah.
And they spent $17.5 million to defend a case that they know they're more going to lose. So
yeah.
So I look at it and I go, okay, Mr. Mayor, you have this tape. I know you got the tape. You have the tape. Why are you wasting the taxpayers' money and keep on going with this charade that you're just wasting taxpayers' money and saying, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. And the thing is this, I went to the mayor and shook his hand and said, thank you for doing a good job. So you had to know I knew about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then he tells me, you got to have patience. My people, we've been patient long enough. I'm not doing that no more.
Wow. Well, it looks like, and I'm hoping that the citizens of
New London,
New London, are aware of what their mayor has done and show that at the polls.
And it's sad because with great responsibility comes great power. And the thing is that you did the right thing. Whatever you did, he left. Thank you for doing what you're doing. Now it's your job to say, hey, let's move forward, but not cover up the dirty history. America has a great habit of hiding the dirty history. And the thing is everybody got demons. But let's face it, move forward. You did the right thing by placing Brian Wright into the position he's in. But if you're starting to hide behind it, and then it looks dirty, it's wrong, and people didn't vote for this.
Well, not just that too. This would be a good opportunity for to show the police department and the community what we're not going to do. Right?
What we're not going to accept.
Well, right. Like I love it when my sisters, they tell you right quick, this is what we're not going to do. Right. So this would have been a good opportunity to make that statement as a mayor to say, you know what, here's what we're not going to do. All right. We're not going to discriminate. We're not going to, but then hiding it. You have a great chief now, but when he retires, when he leaves, what's going to stop the next chief from repeating that same culture? Well,
this is this big scream for reform and transparency in Connecticut. There's a new accountability bill that was signed. A lot of older police officers are very angry about it. And there were certain aspects of the accountability bill that I didn't agree with, but there was a lot of it that I did. Just especially in New England, no one wants to change. Everybody's done the same thing the same way. We've always done it this way. That's the mantra of the police department. Why are we doing it? Oh, well, we've always done it this way. There's a lack of leadership when it comes to certain police departments. Police departments, and especially their administration, are not hired by their leadership qualities. They're hired by how they answer a test.
Wow.
And if you think about that, it's not you answered the right question, but you could be the worst leader in the world, and then on top of that, no one's sending you to leadership school. That was one thing I tried to do, is say, hey, I can answer a question, but what is my leadership for my department and my community? And those are things I think with the new administration, we will start to push some leadership qualities. Also, I just think that there should be more of a active recruitment of minority officers. Usually it's, hey, if we didn't have any minorities apply, so I don't know what to tell you, man. No one applied, so I can't hire them. No, you need to actively recruit and actively show that this is a police department that a minority would want to work at. Unfortunately, we have issues in our police department where female and openly gay officers are being discriminated against, and they've reached out to the city through emails, and nothing happens.
And this
is a bigger issue.
Yeah, that's we've talked about that issue on this platform. We had a whole forum on diversifying law enforcement, and we talked about trying to get people of color to apply, trying to get more women to apply, trying to get more LGBT to apply, because one of the things that we notice is that representation is important in law enforcement, um, but also developing a consciousness around it too. Going back to what you said originally about some of the black officers that sort of gave you the advice of know your place. We want to make sure that when we are bringing in black law enforcement, that we're bringing in conscious black law enforcement
True.
as well. Um, wow, man, this has been we have I don't know if you have any questions that we need to post or anyone had any questions for Sergeant Rogers. I'm not doing a good job of keeping an eye on the chat box. Um, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask it, and then we can share with Cornelius. Um, but before we get to that point, I always ask this question because I do like to leave. Or there is one question there. Is there a second or backup copy of the tape?
So unfortunately, this officer put his livelihood on the line. Okay,
Yes.
I'm not going to ask this. He did what he had to do. There is no incentive for him to release this tape publicly. Okay,
Yeah.
and I personally, I know what's on the tape. I'm happy with what happened.
Right.
And if anyone should be upset about it, it's me. I'm okay of how it happened. Do I believe the mayor should have showed some leadership skills and looked at this and took this head on? Yes, but unfortunately, we have small town politics. Maybe he didn't want to look at the guy at the restaurant tomorrow. I don't know, but
Right.
I'm fine with it. What I'm not fine with is you telling me I need to have patience.
Right. Right.
It's almost like saying know your place. You will get to you when we get to you. I know you were wronged, but you gotta wait for your turn. Those are the things I'm not cool with. With it being a secondary tape, honestly, I know when this ever gets to court, I know that person will step up because he's an outstanding individual and a great human being and a great police officer. I know he'll do the right thing. And if it wasn't for the NAACP helping me throughout this journey, and same with Sean Kennedy and Nabilo, I wouldn't be here because my union left me out in the cold.
I gotta say, I've done a lot of, I'm actually myself an NAACP member, and I've done a lot of work with Nabia, and it's so important that those resources exist, but also that they continue to support Black law enforcement that are going through these issues. And one of the things I would say, if you haven't done so by now, Sean, if you post a Nabio link in the chat, so if anyone has a similar story to Cornelius, they know of that resource.
Honestly, that's a great organization, Sean. If I was going to have a kid, I'd name him after you because he should. I am honestly, I am forever indebted to him in that organization. Also with the NAACP with Tamara Lanier, who is fighting her own fight against Harvard. She's a great woman. Same with Jean Jordan, great people. I don't want to forget Anthony Nolan. All those people were there willing to stand up for me when my union turned their back on me. And like I said, Sean would call me on a daily basis to say, "Hey, I just want to make sure you're okay."
Yeah,
I've never met Sean personally in my life. I just recently saw a picture of him. So if it wasn't for Sean, this is what they do to you. They put you out on the island and they make sure no one talks to you. I would send emails to my union. Hey, I was wondering, can you guys help me out? No one responded to an email.
Wow.
So Sean, the NAACP, which is A lot of people don't realize that because you're a cop, you can't go to them. You can.
Yeah. Yeah, I get what you're saying. You know, I've been fortunate to work along Sean and Nablio on a couple of things, I'm definitely glad that resource does exist. So, um, but yeah, so continue to ask your questions. But Cornelius, I'm looking at the time at 7:31, and I always promise my guests that I'm only gonna keep them on for 60 minutes unless they got more to say. Um, and of course, Sean, who's backstage, loves the after party. So if there are more questions coming on, we could do an after party if you like. If you like to stay for the extra 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, I got
Um,
nothing to do.
all right. So, but before we do that, I want to ask you the question that I ask every guest on here, and you're no different. So I want to ask you, what is your message to America?
So I've watched the show a couple times. So I'd rather do this. My message to a Black America is something that I want to speak to directly. I have the same nose as you. I have the same thick lips as you. I have the same skin tone as you. I understand the problems that are in police departments, but I'm not your enemy. I can relate to the problems of our community, and I want to fix those problems. I chose law enforcement as that way of doing so. Don't attack me because I chose to be a police officer. Support me because I am a gatekeeper to this community because I'm you. I know the pain and all the issues because I experienced those because I'm Black. I understand being pulled over just because you're Black. I understand being looked at differently because you're Black. Remember, I don't wear this uniform every day. I go out to other neighborhoods and I get the same treatment. So I understand that. My job and what I chose to do is to make this community better. And that's why I decided to be a police officer here. But other Black police officers in other towns and states, we need support from our Black community to support us and let us know that we're accepted and we want to do the right thing. And that's what my message is to Black America.
My brother, it's been truly a pleasure having you on. Again, stay on for the after party. Folks who are watching, who are not familiar with the after party, it's when I end the show, but we keep it going live. And we want you to keep asking your questions. And I pretty much open the floor for Q&A. But with that said, I want everyone here to have a great night. Again, stay tuned for the after party. Stay tuned to the after party.
Tell us what you really mean, ma'am.
Law enforcement officers should be role models, period. If you can't be a mentor, you shouldn't have that uniform.
I could take a break from this world.
All my blinders are taken off. I can see what you guys are talking about. Y'all don't see what we're talking about yet. Policing is the law enforcement arm of systemic racism.
Be a lost girl and fly.
Well, the message for America is that they need to wake up. We need to stop the repeat. We need to stop the revolving door. And we need to come up with better ways of law enforcement. Criminal justice reform needs to reflect what it is. Ain't no way in the world somebody should be sitting in jail with a $1 bail for months.
I just wanna be free. Finally, finally.
All right, we're down in the after party. All right, so I love the after party because I get to relax and depend on the questions that flow in. We got a few people still logged on right now. There's one question that I do want to point out. If you could put up there a Tom, I think it's Slutch question about the union leadership. It's there. The question is, there are some changes in the union leadership also. So let's talk about that. How do we look at our unions, and how do we change the leadership to that?
So the union leadership usually reflects the PD or the union body itself. Unfortunately, We had an issue with the union body. At first was very young, very naive. I always use the saying, "Don't be a sheep." And unfortunately, we had a lot of sheep. They trusted in the older generation, the older police officers, that they were going to do the right thing, and unfortunately, they led them to the slaughterhouse. With the new change of union leadership, they more likely ran out. They saw the writing on the wall. The chief left, which that was their good old friend, the good old boy network. He abruptly left, and now everybody's running for the hills. So now the union leadership is all now trying to change, which is for the best. I'm looking forward to it. I think, and that's the only reason why I decided to stay in the union, is because I knew that change was going to come. Even in the newspaper articles, probably 8 months ago, I'm no messiah, but I said change is coming. And I knew this was going to happen because I just read other people's lawsuits and their other stories. And this tends to be a common theme that, hey, once the chief leaves, all his little cronies tend to run after. And unfortunately, that was connected to the union.
Wow. And that might even speak to the reason why you can have a tape or something like that and it doesn't get anywhere, because if the union leadership is tied to the police leadership, and yeah, Sean, you asked a great question here too. I don't know if you saw Sean's question. So what would you like to see from other Black officers regarding speaking out and using their voice?
I tended to, I after a while, the problem is where I'm a police officer, I had no true mentorship. So I had no Black police officer come to me and say, "Hey, I see what you're doing, but you need to do this and this." And there might have been one or two Black police officers who might have. There was a Black detective, great man. He came to me and said, "Hey, you might want to slow down." Besides that, no one's giving you those step-by-step play of how to succeed in the police department. And I believe that's more mentorship that we need in and out of the community, and even in our own department. That's what I was talking about. His last name was Raheem Carter. I was looking forward to the man being here because it was someone that I could mentor to bring up, another Black man. Unfortunately, the man passed away of cancer, but I was looking forward to that, to say, "Hey, I want you to succeed. I want us to come up together and do the thing." Right now, there's a Black female. I'm trying to convince her every day to take a promotional exam. She don't want to do it, but I won't give up until she takes one.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes that's what it takes. I think that with you look at again, going back to the history, mentorship. Moses and Philip and Hallie, they all mentored Samuel Battle to go into law enforcement. And there was one quote that I always talk about that sort of sticks with me is they said to him, they have a sit down, the typical round to a sit down and what you need to know about law enforcement. And one of them told Samuel Battle that he had to be better than the best white cop. And that was a direct quote from 1911, right? And so when you think about that statement coming from then, looking at it now, that it speaks volumes. It really does, All right, let's see anyone else in here. And so one of our members who's online actually pointed out to this is that we had a discussion. I'm not sure if Cornelius, if you saw the what do you call it? What's the documentary? Yeah, documentary Women in Blue. Yeah. So we had the filmmaker on along with Martin and some of the other Black law enforcement, and that was a topic that was also hit hard on. It was mentorship and training, and I think it was actually Shanette Hall from ESOP that was talking about the mentorship that she received going into law enforcement, and how that sort of made her be a vocal advocate. So what you mentioned, mentorship is also extremely important. So that's a good point there. All right. Oh, any other questions? Because we keep it here. This is just the after party. This is the after party, folks. So it only lasts as long as the questions keep coming. So, um, oh, that's a different question that Sean's asking is what would you like to see from Black police associations? But there are a lot of Black police organizations out there. Like I mean, it's quite a bit. But what they do, what they provide, is a little bit different. So, from your point of view, Cornelius, what would you like to see from Black police organizations?
So in New England, unfortunately, we're pretty in our own little bubble.
Hmm.
We don't have we don't know. If it wasn't, I can't even remember how I got connected to Sean. I think it was from another Black, he's a probation officer, John Watts, who did training for that organization, and he mentioned that organization. Besides that, I don't know. There's Noble, there's Nabulo. Only thing I knew is because I literally Googled it, especially in my area in the country. Like I said, New England is very in their own bubble. There's no resources, and I just wish that organizations would just be more, maybe advertise more, because I had no clue. I didn't know. Now that I'm looking into like St. Louis and Chicago, and I'm seeing these other PDs in these other states, maybe that's another question or another answer for Black officers if their union's not helping them out. In New England, it's union rules, and if you don't reach out to the union, then you really don't get any help.
Yeah, and that's a pity too. And again, to me, I agree with you. Is getting the word out about these. To me, I like to call them Black conscious law enforcement organizations, right?
Yes.
Right, because there are, like I said, there are some that, there's Black talk, right, where we get a bunch of Black folks together, we're gonna talk a certain way,
Yep.
and then there's like when they get in the space where they're with their white peers, it's a different tone, and
Yeah.
so I'm looking for that real
realness.
conversation. Yes, the realness, and I wish there was like a rubric to like realness of you should call it. So I've asked Sean to put up some of the comments that people are sending to you in the messenger, because I don't know if you can see them or not, but
Yeah.
People are saying good luck and offering words of encouragement. So definitely. Cornelius, again, anytime you want to come on, let me know. I'd be more than happy. If you have an update,
Yep.
let me know. We can always do an update episode too. And so if anyone else has any questions, I'm looking at the chat box. I think we still got like 15 people logged in,
Mhm.
but I think they're just seeing what's coming up next, right? So, but besides that, I think we had a great conversation.
Yeah. To that question, like I said, this officer literally risked everything to do what he did.
Yeah.
And I can't thank him enough. I'm not going to put him out there for display. But the city has the tape. Whatever they say, I know it's wrong. They have the tape, and they choose to do what they're going to do. So if they're going to continue wasting taxpayers' money instead of coming to the table and saying, "No, what, Sergeant Rodgers, sorry, but you were right with what you said. How can we move forward?" They want to continue wasting taxpayers' money, then I apologize to the taxpayers of New London.
Yeah, and I see there's a question there, but I like to say to that white officer who did the right thing, I would like to applaud you. I don't know who you are. I don't want to know your name, because again, I think that's protection, and I agree with you, Cornelius. That's a protection thing. But I always talk about when I offered when I do special episodes, it usually is like something happened in our society, and I want Black law enforcement to hop on and to have this discussion about it. And I say black law enforcement, but really it's an open invitation to law enforcement. I do not actually say black law enforcement. I say anyone in law enforcement can have this discussion. So, for example, when the insurrection happened in January, I pull a call out to law enforcement. I'm like, black, white, Hispanic, doesn't matter. Let's discuss this. And only black officers responded. And so, I like to say to our white brothers and sisters, who are in law enforcement, those who speak out, thank you. I mean, seriously, because they get targeted just as much as the black officers do, right? So, seriously, thank you. Like if you see something and you are, you want to make that change, you want to say this is not right, um, brother. I mean, this brother recorded it, right? I mean, that's pretty extreme.
Well, and the thing is that he only recorded it because he knew something was wrong. He's like, why is he wanted to meet with the chief? The chief says, hey, let me meet you at Starbucks in 3 towns over, which is like 10, 15 minutes away. And he's like, something doesn't sound right. So I understood why he did it. It wasn't like he was like, oh, I'm just going to record him because I want to catch him on. I'm going to set him up with the okadoke and he's going to say something stupid. He was just trying to figure out why is he getting passed over. And fortunately for me, the chief decided that this is what he was going to say. It bothers me though that there's other officers that he's probably said the same thing to, but no one was brave enough to come to me and say, hey, he said this to me. I don't think it's right. I see what's going on to you. I'm willing to stand up. Now, this officer stood up, and like I said, if I could give him an award and I would, he did what was right because I knew that he wouldn't be able to sleep to let that go. And a lot of people were like, well, why did you hold it so long? And I mean, the thing is, this man had to make sure he was going to be able to put food on his table if this was not going to work, because his biggest fear was, I go against that blue wall, that thin blue wall, and that wall falls on me. Where am I going to go?
Right.
That's
reality too. I mean, I think that, there's about, so when I first started doing my my work with law enforcement, the first couple of folks who came forward were white officers, and I remember having these very in-depth conversations about race, and I applaud them because, let's be honest, talking to me about race is probably not an easy thing to do. I do think that I'm sort of unapologetic when it comes to that. Not like I'm not disrespectful, but I'm definitely like, I read books, okay, and I tend to reflect. I'm also big into slave narratives, so a lot of my conversation reflects that, and I always say to white officers who have those conversations with me, thank you, because I know it's definitely not an easy conversation to have. I know I'm not as polished when it comes to some of the things that I say, but it's important to be said. So there was a question before. There's a lot of things. So, but there was a question that popped up a minute ago. Yeah, that's the one. Thank you. How do you handle black on black discrimination within your department? You mentioned this, Cornelius, a little bit at the beginning of this episode. Not so much the discrimination towards like you, but sort of the concept of, when you are trying to speak out, you're trying to do something, not having that black officer support. But how do you deal with black on black discrimination in a department?
So the black officers in our department are pretty much there's very small of us, so there's not a lot of us. I think it's about 7. Our union couldn't even tell us in a radio show how many black officers there were, because it doesn't matter. So there's 7 now. We hired one, so there's 8. I shouldn't be able to count on 2 hands how many black police officers there are.
How many are total? How many total?
I shouldn't be able to say there's this many. I shouldn't be able to do that. Especially in New London, which is a very diverse community. What's even more shocking is that I can say there's no more than 30 black police officers in New London County.
Wow. And how many total officers is it in the county, would you say?
So in Connecticut, we don't have a county form of government. So each county has their own little towns.
Okay.
So within the little towns and cities, there's no more than probably 30 police officers. We all know each other. So,
Wow.
so you look at it, you go, there needs to be more of an outreach. What's more troubling and what I say, but hey, guess what? We need to do more active recruitment. Is my town is next to the Navy base. Okay.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
In that Navy base, there's thousands of Black educated men and women who are in the military who are going to leave eventually. It's a sub base. We need to reach out to them because that is a segue to law enforcement.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the past administrations failed to do so. But think of the hopes of, oh, well, no Black people applied. Personally, that's not good enough for me anymore.
Right. Right.
But the Black on Black discrimination with outside my department, it's mostly because of people not understanding why I got in the police department. I got into law enforcement. And their main thing is, oh, you're selling out. I've been called the N-word by a Black person. I've been called the N-word by a white person. Okay. I've been called a pawn by a white person. I've been called a pawn by a Black person. So the hate is just general. I don't believe it's hate. Sometimes I have to remember that because I wear this uniform, I'm going to get extra attention that I wouldn't get if I wear this yellow polo shirt. So I try to make sure that I keep everything in perspective. But it's tough because I just want to help my community.
Right. Right. Yeah. And again, I put up a timeline just recently. And, again, this story echoes all the way back to 1892. I don't know, Cornelius, if you had a chance to know about Strategies for Justice, but it's founded on the narrative of two people, Samuel Battle and Moses P. Cobb. Moses P. Cobb being my great grandfather.
Yeah, I knew that.
And there's a story that, there's this great book, and actually I have it on my desk always. This is called the Black Shields. Okay. It's a good read.
Oh, it's a good read. I read, but I don't know that.
But in the book, they talked about my great grandfather Moses P. Cobb and how people didn't see him as a Black man doing a job. They saw him, as you are saying, a sellout. They saw him as they actually threw garbage at him. And back then, I mean, that's how deep that got. And so I think that to hear the story, and again, it's personal, right? It's personal because I think that people need to understand, that because you put on that uniform doesn't make you the enemy, like you said at the beginning. And most of the time you'll be fighting for their rights.
Correct.
And so this is echoed. I mean, we got guests from previous episodes. We got guests from future episodes who have the same sentiment.
Yeah. It's tough. Like when I did speak out, literally the same day it hit the newspaper, my car got sprayed with OC or mace. Mm-hmm. So it's tough speaking out. But like I said, I didn't join the police department because I thought I was going to be loved. I did it because I wanted to make a difference in my community, and it sucks. It really bothers me, but every night I know I'm doing the right thing because if like they say, if you don't have no haters, you ain't doing something. Right? Well, I got a bucket load of haters, and so much that they OC'd my car, they decided to take my points away, and every time they see me, they spit on the ground. So I think I have enough, and that's sad that I have officers that do that literally when they see me, they spit on the ground. But I have to say to myself, I'm doing the right thing because you wouldn't be doing that if I wasn't. Right.
Wow. Well, Cornelius, I know we got people still logged in, they're still watching, but I want to, be conscious of your time.
Yep.
And so, folks, feel free to share this video. It'll be up on Facebook. And by the way, Twitter, it actually did appear on Twitter. I did not know that was even an option. I'm a site now. So it's now on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. So feel free to share it. And I want to thank you, Cornelius. If you want to stay on for 5 more minutes to say goodbye to my brother backstage.
Oh, yeah.
So don't log off this yet, but I want to say goodbye to folks watching, and everyone have a great night.